Hello again to all you listeners and viewers. We're Megan and Morgan, and on today's show, we are going to be talking about the importance of art and how that helps us to form our vision of the human person as gift. That's what's coming in this episode of Naked Without Shame.
Open your hearts, open up your hearts to Christ. Do not be afraid.
Okay, before we begin, we just wanted to invite you to download the Awaken app. The Awaken app is basically like a social media alternative. You can get on and you can talk with people who are like-minded. You can also talk with show hosts such as me and Megan. You can also have access to prayers. There's a shop, all sorts of cool things. So to download the Awaken app, you go to theawakenapp.io.
And Morgan and I are also excited to invite you to consider joining our patronage community. If you go to the website, nakedwithoutshameshow.com, you will see us there and opportunities and ways in which you can support us in this ministry. You'll see videos and content from us, and joining our patronage community allows you to have perks such as time spent with us, communicating more with us about the theology of the body and other TOB resources.
Hi everyone. If you're interested in going on a pilgrimage yet this year, you can visit selectinternationaltours.com/awaken.
Okay, so today's topic, Morgan, is art and media. Mm-hmm. And why are we talking about this? Well, John Paul II clearly thinks this is important because he wrote about it in the Theology of the Body text. He has a section on just the role of art in media and the importance of that in understanding the human person, actually. Mm-hmm. So for all of you art fans or maybe future art fans or artists, this could be an interesting talk for you.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to start off by kind of highlighting in the text what John Paul II says, in particular about the importance of how art and seeing art, particularly the human body and art, forms our understanding of like ourselves, but also through in culture, right? Yeah. So art is a fundamental part of a culture for years, for centuries. People have drawn images on the sides of caves and have created sculptures of the human person. Mm-hmm. So this is nothing new. This goes back to primitive times.
I mean, yeah, it's like it's an essential part of humanity. They say that, I've heard before that is actually like the first sign of humanity versus whatever we were before. According to evolution, like Neanderthals.
Like the animals, right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, like or
Neanderthals. Okay.
Before we were Homo sapiens, like what they would distinguish Homo sapiens by is art.
Ah, nice.
I forgot where I heard this. This might be totally wrong, but it was. I thought it was really
good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That art is like a really essential part of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So John Paul II actually says that using art sharpens our personal human sensibilities and is certainly a factor and fruit of culture. So he agrees. He's like, hey, this like actually sharpens our understanding of who we are and the truths around us, right? So using art and viewing art, takes into ourselves like an idea of the artist's intent, shall we say?
Yeah.
Right. So art is created from a person. Mm-hmm. It's inspired by a person, and so something of the artist comes out in the art. Yeah. The intent of the artist, right?
Yeah. And their view of reality.
Yeah.
Their like perception of truth and goodness and beauty is, echoed in the art piece. There's something of that. And that, and then we are like the viewer of the art is then shaped by that.
Yeah.
And that's like a huge part of culture.
Yeah.
Throughout human history is artists sort of like proposing a vision of reality and then a culture being formed by that and then producing more artists. And it's an interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
It's essential in like creating a worldview. I mean,
yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that, creating a worldview, because we talk a lot about how the theology of the body can help us shape our Christian worldview as a gift. So in a really particular way, the human person or the human artist can also influence that worldview based on how he expresses his heart, his or her heart.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is really important, right? So if we are to be artists, or if we're going to be enjoying art, we want to make sure that the worldview lines up with the Christian worldview of gift, this sacramental worldview.
Yeah, and that it's also lining up with reality. You know, it's not like we're just like trying to produce a Christian worldview, like impose that on reality.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, but it's like we're seeing reality rightly. We're seeing it in its truth and in its full beauty and glory. And so we want true art, like not just Christian art. I mean, yes, Christian art, but true art. I think that's sort of the goal of the Christian artist.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So John Paul II also kind of like calls that to task, like for the artist in the Theology of the Body. He says, in particular, artists who are recreating the human body in art, the artist who takes up this subject in any sphere of art or by audio-visual technologies must be conscious of the full truth of the object, of the whole scale of values connected with it. He must not only take them into account abstractly, but also live them rightly himself.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting.
yeah, that is really interesting. So, can you think of a piece of art or like an example of where the artist has achieved this? Something you've seen.
Interesting.
I know you like art, Morgan.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
I do. I'm trying to think. I mean, this is kind of an interesting question. Yeah, I think for me, art has been like a really important part of my conversion and my sort of being formed in Christianity. I'd say that there have been a few, I would say for me, mostly like literature. I mean, I know that's not visual art. We're going to be kind of focusing on visual art in this talk. But for me, like literature, like people like Paul Claudel in The Tidings Brought to Mary. It's like a really beautiful novel from the early 20th century. That just like really, yeah, his intent. I mean, he was also a convert. And his intent was really to like propose Christianity to like this modern world. I'm trying to, yeah, there's so many examples of that, like in literature. And then, yeah, I think also just like think the most easy answer to this question is like, think like the Renaissance, like the classics, like this was the, in some sense, like height of the Christian worldview, you know, following the Middle Ages where Christianity really became like this kind of empire in the Western world. The Renaissance really captures like sort of in a sense, like the fullness of, and the height of the Christian worldview. And yeah, it's an interesting thing because it both reflects that culture. It reflects like a thoroughly Christian culture. I mean, it had its problems for sure. It's not to say it's perfect, but like it represents that culture. And then at the same time, it forms it. It reinforces it and forms it. And it forms people in a way of thinking. I mean, think of, yeah, something like a classic example would be like the Sistine Chapel. I was just in Italy and just like taking in all this beauty all the time. I was so struck because, you know, obviously as an American, like we're not used to beauty. We really crave it. And so, yeah, being in Italy, like all of us Americans, I was with a group of friends and we were just like, wow. I always have this thought of like, I think it's so easy to, it's so much easier to see reality in a beautiful, good way, if that makes sense, when you're surrounded by beauty like that. Like you just feel this like peace and this like inspiration constantly. And then it really it was a fuel to my prayer. So yeah, I've definitely experienced that where like art does really shape and influence your way of seeing reality. And then compare that to like, you know, driving through like a modern city that's like, you know, dilapidated and depressed. And you're just like, you just feel, you're not inspired. I mean, you're not inspired to pray. You don't feel like at one or at harmony with reality. You're just kind of, it produces this numbness in you. So I don't know. That'd be my answer.
Yeah,
What
that's
do you
a great
think?
answer. Well, I liked what you said about beauty. That stood out to me in your answer. Just communicating beauty in art is so important, and we also do want to affirm that like art is just, it's good in and of itself. Like creating is very good. Self-expression is good in art. Once again, like getting to the truth of like who God is and who man is expressed through art is like a real good and true experience, right? So, like including beauty in that, it just is a part of who God is and who the human person is. So when you see something beautiful in art, it's like, wow, like I'm drawn to that. I like want to contemplate that more. And especially like in light of the human body, I liked that you mentioned literature, because literature and writing is also an art. It's an expression of a person. Thinking back to, like art in the human body, like the communication of dignity and beauty of this element of the divine in a person, is great. I think it's really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, let's transition now into kind of what can happen when that is not like the foundation of the artist's heart. This desire to communicate the whole truth of the person as gift, as beautiful, as a participation in the divine like life of God. You know, this beauty and that elevates you. I think we would say that is maybe prevalent in our culture, particularly with the over-sexualization of the body. In the culture that's throughout it. I mean, you know, we have media, so we have access to images of people all the time. But in a particular way, it seems like in recent decades, the human body has been shown to be more like an object, like a sexual object, in a reductive way. Yeah, like a really reductive way. Not to say that like the human person shouldn't have like sexuality included in the you know what I mean, like in its demonstration. I mean, you see like a picture of a naked body in art, like that's just a part of the person, you know,
like Da Vinci. I mean, it's a beautiful and it's a dignifying. I mean, when you look at like a nude painting by one of the Renaissance artists like Da Vinci, and you're just like, wow, like you're not, you see like the full dignity of that person, and you're just like in awe of how beautiful the body is. And you don't feel like this sort of, when you look at like I don't know, like a Victoria's Secret ad, like you don't have the same experience. At least I don't. Like, it's like there's sort of like this shame or this kind of like, ooh, I shouldn't be looking at this person like this. Like, this is not fully right. There's something off about this. Versus like a Leonardo da Vinci nude, and you're like, it's a totally opposite experience. But it's not about like how much clothing they're wearing. That's what's interesting. Right. It's about the gaze actually and the intent of the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah, like we can tell they're different, like same picture or same kind of, like you're saying, body, but there's something in like the Victoria's Secret ad that entices like this concupiscence, this lust to the body. Not that sexual desire is bad, right? But like the fact that in that portrayal, there's an intimacy that's not respected in a way. Like there's an intimacy that is necessary for the gift of self that's enticed in an image that isn't ordered to love. Right, which John Paul II mentioned.
I mean, the person is portrayed purely in a sexual way, minus their dignity, basically, minus like the rest of who they are. And so it's the whole like classic thing that I think it's a Christopher West. Is that Christopher West that says that? It's not that pornography shows too much, it's that it shows too little. I think
Yeah.
that this is what we're trying to get at here,
Yeah.
is that like, it's not that it's like bad to show the body. And it's also not that sexual desire is bad or that sexuality is bad. It's that it's when it's reduced and it's separated from the whole of the person, it becomes a violation. It becomes an offense against the dignity of the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And that's that shame that we're experiencing when we see that's that kind of like, ooh, like, I don't know if this is right. I feel there's something just off about it in your experience, I think. And I think that can become, covered over by a lot of people. We become desensitized to these things.
In fact, John Paul II also talks about that in this section.
Yeah.
He talks about shame as like a function of society. We will never get rid of shame in this life. And it does indicate that we are, we have a tendency to sin, but it actually does have a positive aspect too. Like it protects us from entering into something that might not be good for us.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
it's
shame,
not
like
true
I'm
to our dignity.
Yeah. Like if I follow this image of the Victoria's Secret ad, or I get tempted to view pornography, like the shame is a good function to say, like, actually, I don't think this is how I should be viewing this right now. This isn't like the fullness of the person. This won't make me happy actually to go down this path.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, John Paul II definitely affirms like the role of shame, and that we should really listen to our shame. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We should listen to it.
That's interesting. That's a really good point. I mean, shame not in a, shame in a sort of positive way. It's an interesting, you could distinguish between like a bad kind of shame where it's like you feel like you're inherently wrong or messed up, or like that's an unhealthy kind of shame. But there is a right kind of shame that he talks about in the Theology of the Body that just it's a self-protective mechanism. It's why Adam and Eve covered themselves, because they sensed that they would no longer, after the fall, be viewed in the fullness of who they were.
Right.
And so they instinctually wanted to protect themselves. And that's good. I mean, that's something to honor within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So with this in mind, we have like this call to really, use art for the sake of developing a culture with a beautiful worldview of gift, right? Especially in light of the human body. Portraying the human body in art and media can really like teach us about who we are and about who others are. On the flip side, we've had this experience too of like, oh, this is, an image in art and media could be reduced to the level of like the sexual value of a person without seeing the full meaning of the person.
Right.
Where that sexual value kind of gets lifted into the personal value. When we were talking with Jason Everett a few episodes ago, he mentioned this concept of the personal value and the sexual value of the person. And that was really great that chastity, like the virtue of chastity, allows us to take that up into understanding the whole person and like loving them rightly,
Right.
rather than objectifying them. So that was a little tangential, but it kind of makes sense there. I guess.
Yeah. No, totally. It's totally related.
Yeah, it's related. So, in light of our culture being, as some would say, like over sexualized, or maybe even in a sense like pornographic.
Yeah.
How do we then begin to not see ourselves that way or see others that way, because it's so pervasive?
Yeah. That's interesting.
How do we begin to see that? Even if you, are trying to live a good Catholic life, you're trying to remain, you're trying to have custody of your eyes, right? That's what I mean.
Yeah, and to see people rightly and to
yes.
see yourself rightly. And yet you live in this culture where we're constantly bombarded by these, like we were saying before, like art shapes our vision of reality. It just does. It's inevitable. When we're exposed to a piece of art, we're formed in a certain way of viewing reality that the artist is kind of trying to communicate. And so when we, even if we're trying to live this like great Catholic life and see things truly and honor ourselves and others, like we still have that formation, and it's subconscious. It's not something that we choose. When we go around and we see Victoria's Secret ads or stuff on TV that's like violent or like, reductive, reducing people sexually. We can't help but be formed by that. And it influences the way I think it does a lot of things. I think it can make us skeptical of like how we're being seen by other people. If that's like, if we're constantly seeing that vision of reality, you know what it makes sense? Like, so then we think like, well, maybe other people are looking at me that way, or maybe you start to look at yourself that way. And it becomes this sort of like, this shame or this like self-hatred. I think that happens very often, especially, to women, but to men too. We internalize basically this vision that we see, in basically what you're saying, like pornographied images or depictions.
Yeah. So what would be like a way in which to begin to create a culture of life, really, like a culture of love, a culture of like vision of the gift of the human person? I think like the first thing is to understand the truth of yourself and to really like renounce those things that come up in you. Like, oh, I'm sensing like this tendency to think of myself as an object.
Yeah.
Or I'm sensing this like shame I have about me because I don't fit in with this art or these images. Like kind of renounce them. Say like, this is not true. This is not the truest part of who I am.
Yeah.
Or even when you're tempted to see something and realize like that this is causing concupiscence, like renounce it. Like, this is not the truest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be one step. Like that could be helpful.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree. Yeah. I think that's essential. But then on the other hand, like forming in yourself the truth is, I think, equally important, because I think it's Fulton Sheen. I'm going to mess up this quote, but he's like, you can't, basically the gist of it is you can't replace sin with nothingness. You have to place a good in there.
Yeah.
Basically, or else you're not going to be able to do it. Basically, you need to be, sin is trying to, the whole thing about sin is like, you're looking for a good, but you're missing the mark. I mean, and you're confused about what the good is. We can't help but want to be happy. We can't help but want to seek the good, but we're confused, and that's why we sin. And so to be formed then in what's truly good is like the most essential part of kind of getting all this, this shame and this gaze of concupiscence on ourselves and on others out of our system. Like we need the good. We need to be formed in what the truth of man really is. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we can do that. I'd say, I don't know. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think that like creating good art yourself could be like a way.
Yeah.
You know, like having like a movement of artists who like want to create beautiful things, beautiful films, beautiful
absolutely
images of the human body, beautiful music. I think there probably is, from my recollection, like a movement of artists who are trying to do this in our culture.
Yeah, there definitely are.
Because they see the importance of how that transforms the way you see reality, like we're saying.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So maybe tapping into like those resources. I can't think of any off the top of my head, honestly. If you're out there,
let us know.
Let us know.
We'll shout you out.
We'll shout you out. Yes. Yeah. So.
I can't think of the name. But I know Catholic artists that are like really, really passionate about theology, the body, and like want to portray the human body in a way that's like beautiful and dignified.
Because our sight is so important. You know, like the way we see things and like understand things is so important. You can tell when somebody is looking at you with love and when they're not.
Yeah.
Like that's like, I think, intuitive. We all know that. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's important to form your sight, I guess. Yeah. Through beautiful art. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'd say, that would be one of the main things. It's just like fill yourself with beautiful things. And I mean, prayer, I'd say too, is like a big part of this. Is like, you need to be praying. You need to be like in touch with the source of goodness, truth, and beauty constantly in order to like also to undo all of these lies basically that we've internalized. It's necessary. Yeah. And then that, I mean, the beautiful thing about an artist is like, especially like one that's prayerful, is that they are in touch with that source of like goodness and truth and beauty, like I was saying, and then they can recreate that gaze and allow other people to enter into it. It's really a beautiful, beautiful vocation, the vocation of artists. I mean, John Paul II talks about that artists have like a true vocation, and it's like a necessary element to basically restoring culture. So yeah, if you're a Catholic artist, keep doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I will say too that like the call of the artist is not easy in this culture. Like it's not easy to really always sell the beautiful, you know, like, you know, this reductive, cheapened kind of vision of the human person is more easily kind of sold and taken in. Yeah. You know, it's just easier. Yeah. It requires a virtue, really. Like it requires virtue to be like, no, I want to form myself in what is good, not just what's easy to consume or what everybody else is consuming or what the culture around me is consuming, but to say like, no, I want something greater. I want to hold out for something more beautiful. Yeah. For my life and for my understanding of who I am.
Yeah. And that's what's so interesting about John Paul II saying that there's like a direct correlation between the morality basically of the artist and their ability to produce beautiful art. Because, I mean, if morality is this ability to see rightly and to act accordingly, I mean, that is what's going to produce true art, basically. Right. That, I mean, it makes total sense. And so, yeah, it's really interesting. Like the vocation of the artist is also like, you have a responsibility to form yourself and to learn to love rightly. Yeah. And yeah, then it's like it's a tremendous gift to the world.
Absolutely.
The fruit of
That's
that.
So good.
So,
yeah, that sounds great. All right. So as we wrap up today, we hope that you took something away about, the importance of art in culture. If you're not really an art connoisseur, observer, creator, maybe consider going and checking out art or something and seeing like this experience of your heart. What is the artist trying to communicate? Is it beautiful? Yeah. Is it not? Start to, experience that for yourself. And hopefully after listening to this, you understand the importance of art for the understanding of yourself. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us again today. We hope to see you next time, and God bless.